it. So let's see. There it goes.
Okay. Got it. Okay, it is December 1st, 11:31 a.m. This is Commissioner Barry. I'm calling this meeting of the Medication and Safety Committee of the Oregon Racing Commission to order. I believe our first item on the agenda is calling roll call. Oh, doggone it.
I can do that.
Oh, thank you, Connie.
So Chris Adams, our chief investigator, is absent today. He is off for the day. Good for him. And Tom Everman. I need you to say here so she can hear it when she does minutes.
Here.
Thanks. And I'm here, Connie Wynn. And Mike Twiggs. Mike, say here. Okay, I'm just gonna say Mike is here. I see him, but his mic isn't working. And then we have Commissioner Fowler.
I'm here.
And of course, the chair for this committee, Commissioner Barry.
Present. Okay. Before we move on to approving the meeting agenda, I just wanted to mention that for the purposes of this meeting, it's the committee members who should be participating in discussion unless there's acknowledgement from the chair, me. Anybody who'd like to say anything or make a public comment during this meeting, if you have on that Zoom the ability to do the little hand raise thing, I think there may be people who want to speak and have useful things to contribute. But I want to also make sure that we maintain good order. We have a good sized agenda today, and even with 2 hours, I want to make sure that we move through it effectively. So with that, could I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion is carried. Moving on to old business, Connie.
All right, in review from our last meeting, we had discussed the following, and to the best of my understanding, these are all approved for us to go forward. The first is a pilot project on horseshoers, which would be done by Grants Pass. And I would like to thank Rod Lowe for volunteering to work on that. Rod, I will put together like a little document on what that will include and work with you to come up with some ideas and standards.
Okay.
Then we had discussed assessment of racing soundness for horses that have not raced for more than 150 days. We may or may not want to discuss that and get more detail on that. We discussed necropsies for all catastrophic injuries will require necropsies. That's a standard that is in place with HISA and many states, even if they're not HISA. We've always, in the past, we've done them at the commercial race meet, which was in Portland, where the majority of our horses ran. Unfortunately, Portland Meadows closed down, and we don't have a year-round track like we used to. So the sample size that we would get from the commercial racetrack is not a good enough size for us to get an actual good sampling on. So I will leave that to you guys to decide if you want to enforce that or not, and we'll put that into rule. We talked about shockwave therapy, changing to 30 days in advance. No shockwave therapy, and mandatory stand down 14 days that's for steroid injections. Both of those I would change in rule unless there's any change to what I understood from last time. And then we talked about considering scopes for possible bleeders. And that is the old business.
Very good, Connie. Any questions or comments from the committee? I would like to go on the record saying, I've heard the concerns about the effectiveness of necropsy in keeping horses safer. I think I've also heard that we need to demonstrate that we're doing things. So I'd like to go on the record as just saying I think the necropsy is probably a good idea. From both a hey, maybe we will get something standpoint and a demonstrating good faith to the public standpoint, I think it's a good way to go. Any other questions or comments before we move on to new business? Okay.
Oh, it looks like, we have one
Oh,
person
do you
that's
see?
raised their hand. Can you actually go down to reactions? Guys, you see
Well,
where it says reactions at the bottom and there's a hand raising option there? It looks like that.
ooh, somebody.
I just had a question, but I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question.
I'll acknowledge you. Could you please state your name for the record?
I'm Leah Nelson. My question
Yeah.
on the necropsy was, who will pay for that?
The Oregon
that
Racing
gonna be
Commission will pay for it. Now I can't get rid of my hands. I've got all these hands up.
You're very emotive there, Connie.
Where was
There you
the
go.
necropsy?
Oh, they said last time it would be at OSU, but
Well, I don't know that there's anybody there right now that can do a necropsy.
Dave was just saying that he's not sure there's anyone at OSU, because weren't you saying about going to OSU, that there's anybody at OSU right now that can do necropsies?
And we had necropsies done on the last 2 fatalities. So yes, they are there. They can do it. And it's very reasonably priced.
Oh, okay.
And they'll take them 24/7. All we have to do is call and tell them we're on the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments, public or members of the committee? I don't see anyone. Speak
I
up
see
if I'm.
Tom, you have your hand up, but you don't have to because you're a member of the group.
All right, well, the only comment I had on this was that all of our race meets are in the summer. And the horses start with a body temperature at racing time of probably over 102. And asking these people that work on the starting gate or are at the race meet for any other reason, they've basically been up all day, and then to make a 5-hour drive with a dead horse to Oregon State after the race meet or during it is not a good idea. And if we wait till the next day, the horses are cooked. And I consistently get bad letters from Oregon State University about why we sent this horse up there that's too decomposed for them to do a necropsy on. And all they look at is the leg that is broken, which we already knew what the problem was there. But as far as the rest of it, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask Connie if she had any thoughts on those personnel issues. If you have more to add, please, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Tom.
It's just that I think that the idea is good, but the reality of driving from Grants Pass, Prineville, or Union with a dead horse to Oregon State University and dropping her off, they do have a refrigerated room once they get the horse, but they're not going to look at it until the next day. And it just doesn't work out.
Could I add then to Tom? I think you may have a response, Connie, or anybody else who does. But could I add maybe anybody know what it would cost to get a reefer truck at the racetrack?
Well, that'd be pretty expensive. We could certainly ask the budget group if they would consider paying for that. I would say that to me, first of all, there's a few days a year, yes, it would be really hot. And I think if it's really hot, somebody just has to take them down that night. It's a terrible pain in the neck to do. But our point is to get less fatalities so we don't have that problem. Then we don't have to worry about taking them down there. Or we could look at a refrigeration vehicle, but we'd have to get some help from this from the state. That is something that we could request is,
All other things equal, it sounds like that might be a matter to refer to the finance committee. Okay, okay.
we could actually, that might be a good recommendation for the, for our report.
One of the problems with this is that we have no advanced knowledge of when we will actually need something like a refrigerated truck or 50 bags of ice or whatever we decided to throw in with the horse. We don't know if this is going to happen at all during any race meet, or which one or which day. Rod can attest to this, that it's just not known.
You would actually have to own the truck, and it would have to go from race meet to race meet.
Anybody been on Craigslist lately? Anybody know it? I mean, every once in a while,
Yeah,
I think our goal is to make as many parties happy as possible without busting the kitty in the process. Okay, so maybe what we do is we stick a pin in necropsy, say we think it's a good idea. We need to figure out if logistically this is a thing that could be done sustainably. And if we come up with, yes, this is a thing we can do, then we should do it. And if we come up with it doesn't add up and we don't have people and it's just absolutely impossible, then we don't. But I think if it's not going to take too much extra effort, it's probably worth doing for the sake of good practice and relationships, both of which are real important to all of us, I think. Other thoughts, contributions from the committee? Okay. Connie, are you ready to move on, or do you have anything else?
That's it. I just, if there is any change in the other things we discussed, or any other discussion anybody would like to have about the other topics we mentioned.
Okay, then I'm going to say these issues from old business are ready for a more complete report to the commission at our January meeting. Does that sound correct to everybody else? Okay. Good deal. Thank you, everybody, for that conversation. I know. Yeah, thank you for that conversation, guys. Moving on to new business.
The new business, these were the other things to consider. I'm going to actually do A last because that's probably the most complicated. Some of the things that we've considered or talked about as a staff is having maybe our stewards or the secretary or someone review the more extensive vet list history in the database, and if they see any signs, maybe at least it gives us additional flags to do additional screening. Create rules for starting gate. That seems like it's a no-brainer. Although, is Mike still on? Mike Twiggs? They've been working on some ideas on that. I've seen that HISA is recommending that people get PET scans, which is basically MRI. I had a call with the people who sell both the PET and the CAT scan. There are a number of problems with those that could be challenging. I'm not saying they're out of the question, but the PET scan, in addition to be very expensive, it takes an hour for the scan to occur, and the horse has to be sedated. So as a tool for pre-race, it's really not very practical. I'm not sure how they're really using it. Tom might know for some of the tracks that are using it, when they're using it, and maybe he can talk about that. The CAT scan seems more realistic. You'd have to have it on something that can be moved from one location to the other, but it only takes 2 minutes, and the horse does not have to be sedated. These would be things that we would be requesting in the 2025-2027 for legislative approval for the funding to do it if we did. So again, they're not cheap. and I don't know how much good they would do. The X-ray, I know Tom had spoken about X-rays probably being just as good as a CAT scan. That's what I understood, and I'll defer to Tom to speak about that himself, and give your opinion on those. I will also say that probably the technology that seems the best to me right now, which isn't readily available, is the Stride Safe. I've been listening to more and more information on Stride Safe. Unfortunately, and any comments anybody has on this, I'd love to hear. Unfortunately, Stride Safe isn't yet in a position where they can scale up big enough to handle 20,000 horses across the United States. They're in certain set places, such as Washington. And as of right now, they can't do quarter horses because they tried the quarter horses, but their gait is so much different than a thoroughbred. It was tripping every single horse. That's the information I got. They are using this in Washington State, so I was able to get some good information from them. Currently, it's about $35 every time they run. This would be technology that we'd also want to potentially consider for the 25-27 budget and see if we could get government funding. I'm hoping, I think that's a really good one, especially if the prices come down and they're able to do smaller tracks like us. I also believe that they're working on some additional technology that I don't even know about. So with that, I'm gonna let Tom give me your opinion on, share his opinion on those and his thoughts.
Well, I think that the biggest issue on all of these things you've discussed is that they would be used in training or evaluation of a horse that was otherwise found to be have an issue on a pre-race examination. It would not be something that would be part of the pre-race exam. It might be something that a horse was disqualified from racing because of a pre-race exam finding, or the trainer might have a horse that he has noted there's a problem with, for example, an ankle, and he sends it over. This is what typically happens at the larger tracks like Santa Anita. They have a veterinary room where the trainers can send a horse over, get x-rays taken, PET scan, whatever they want, whatever they're willing to afford or the owner's willing to afford, and then have a veterinarian or a qualified person look at this and give them opinions about treatment, stand down time, etc. It wouldn't be part of the pre-race examination because there wouldn't be time for that.
Other questions, comments? I see a hand up. Was that you, Tom, that had your hand up?
Yeah, I think I did
Oh,
that.
okay.
I didn't need to, so
That's
forget
okay. That's okay. I'm just I try to navigate this stuff the same as everybody else. It doesn't always do exactly what we want it to. Anyone else have any other thoughts on imaging technology? I don't know that we know enough about Stride right now that anybody would want to speak to that, but maybe at a future meeting, that would be a nice agenda item to hear a report on.
Well, that's really a training, addition to training. It's not something that would be used during a race or in a work. It would be used in training.
Did I misunderstand that Emerald Downs is using it for racing as opposed to training, or maybe both? I don't know much about it.
I understand that they're using it during training and during the races, but I could be wrong on that.
Okay. Any
Yeah.
chance we get somebody from Emerald Downs to come talk to us some month?
We could even get somebody from Stride Right to talk to us.
I'd sure like that. Anybody have any objections to getting somebody out here to give us more information?
I think that's a great idea.
I agree.
Cool. Okay, Connie, you got that. Other questions or comments?
I will talk to Dr. Friedman, who I know really well. He's the vet at Emerald Downs in Washington. And I will talk to him and see what his experience with this technology is, and if they've used it in training, racing, or both.
That'd be great.
How the horsemen have felt about it. So I'll get his personal opinion.
I'd sure like.
When we do that at a future meeting, possibly before we have the stride rate person on, we can discuss what he has said.
Great, 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 great. That's wonderful. Other
Chair Barry.
thoughts? Oh, yes. Sorry, state your name for the record and I'll acknowledge you, please.
Okay. This is Dave Nelson. I'm on the board of the Oregon Corridors Racing Association that have been involved in racing for, well, since
You don't have
the
to go through all that.
1969.
You don't have to go through
Anyway, it seems to me that I don't see a mission as to what the committee is trying to accomplish. Are we trying to get to zero? Are we trying to get to a fixed number, or what's the purpose? I see a lot of things being thrown in the air, like CAT scans, and I've seen MRIs, and I've seen X-rays, and I've seen temperature probes, and I've seen all kinds of stuff that people come up with. Bounce meters on racetracks from what was the school in the Northeast, MIT. They added a series of people that went around and dropped balls on the racetracks and see how they bounced and all these kind of things. But nobody really said, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? I've had more horses die on my farm than I've ever had die on the racetrack. So I don't know what the mission is. And so I would like to sit here a discussion on what the goal is and what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you for your comments. I think Connie spoke during the last meeting to the specific rate of injury and death that we're shooting for, and I don't remember the exact number. Connie?
The industry standard is 1.5. And last year, not the one where we had these recent injuries, but last year, our rate was 2.65. And this year's worse so far.
So our objective is to get safer racing for Oregon, because there are folks who I think realistically would like to not have racing in Oregon. And if we don't show that we're doing everything we doggone can, man, I've got horses. They're like great big animals on stilts. Stuff happens. I get it. But perception of the public is very important to this industry, is my impression. And we've got to be seen to be doing the best we can, even when it's imperfect. And horses go lame in pastures all the time for no doggone good reason. I don't think that that's the line that's going to promote racing in the state of Oregon. I just don't think that's a way forward. But I appreciate what you're saying. This committee is about health and safety and best practice. So we can say we want all sorts of pie in the sky stuff. I'm all for referring matters to the finance committee, because I realize there's a place where the buck has to stop. We don't have limitless resources. We can't do everything we'd like to do. This committee, in coordination with the other committees and the entire commission, we've got to do the best we can with what we've got. It won't be perfect, and good compromise leaves nobody happy, but I don't know any other way forward in life than to make a few compromises. So
The committee also has to recognize that it's not an arithmetic straight line.
absolutely.
And so it can go up 1 year, it can go down for 5 years, it can go sideways for 3, and it can't be a straight line. It can never be a straight line.
Yeah, I'd
So
like
we
to
had
speak to
2
that.
days.
No,
If you look at the APHIS, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service data for USDA, there's a standard percentage of equines that die and never reach maturity,
Yep.
no matter where they are.
Yep.
If they're running
That's
on
right.
the desert,
That's right.
if they're running in the mountains, or if they're on my farm.
That's right. That's right. And you can go out into the Badlands and you can see Mustangs
right.
that have been bred to be tough by the wilderness, and there'll be a few that are limping along, and that's the way of things. because we are stewards of these animals in the eyes of the public and in our hearts, right? Like you have horses because you love horses. We've got to do as much as we can without breaking ourselves. And I think that's where a lot of this stuff is ultimately going to get decided. Is we're going to see what we think is best practice, and we're going to get as close to best practice as we can, given the constraints that we have. We
If I
want
could-
Oregon racing to be great for everybody. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Fowler.
Thank you. I was just going to add to that, that if our position is just, well, horses are going to die in this sport, that I think that leads to the end of the sport. I agree with you completely. I think we need to look like we are at least trying to do something to make that better. And that's the only way this sport's going to survive, is if the public perceives us making some effort to try and protect the animals. So
I
I'm
can,
just basically
can-
mirroring what you said, Commissioner
Yeah.
Barry.
I can, commissioners, both of you, when I do my budget meeting, I am required to share our percentages of horse racing catastrophes. And it is not going to be pretty the next couple times. And I have got to have answers on what we are doing proactively. And if we don't have anything, we might as well just pack up right now.
So one of the challenges, so I'm way out here in Wallowa County, Oregon. Thank goodness for this wonderful technology that we have. The state in my professional life asks for all sorts of data and information. And when you live in Wallowa County, so I'm in mental health, we have 1 or 2 suicides and we've got like 200% increase. And then we've got another year where we have 0% suicide, which is an insane. And so I think because Oregon is a geographically large state, but population wise, we don't, we're a blip. 10-year averages, 20-year averages, 5-year averages become much more useful. Obviously, time makes data tricky, and those kinds of long-term data points, when you're dealing on election cycles, that can be hard to sell. But yeah, I think recognizing that we have small sample sizes and that compromises the integrity of the data, that's worth saying. Also, bunch of horses wrecked, and a lot of people who have something to say about horse racing in Oregon are not happy about that, and that's something that has to be dealt with. But I do want to say I'm very sensitive to the cost points, to the rigmarole, to the regulation as well. So thank you for your comments. Other comments or questions? People who'd like to be recognized? Okay. Connie? That was public. I guess that was me asking for public comment.
The only other thing that we had on our list is increased security, which I think
Oh,
everybody can agree we need to work on, and it may require additional help from the Oregon Racing Commission to be able to do that, as Mr. Lowe and I have been discussing. And just thoughts, and again, everybody's got a different opinion on this, and I don't care either way. This is a commission decision. One of the suggestions was to have an anonymous hotline. So I'm just throwing those out there for comment.
anyone on this yes, by all means.
I would just offer the comment on hotlines. They sound like a good idea, but for 35 years, we ran the field burning smoke management program in the Willamette Valley for the Department of Environmental Quality. And it was then moved to the Department of Agriculture, and we provide similar services to them. But nonetheless, they both had an anonymous hotline. And it got where after about the first week in business, they could identify, you know, that's the same guy up in Silverton or up in Mill City or over in
They're down in Eugene.
yeah, wherever it may be, that are calling in 3 or 4 times a day. And there's a guy that called us regularly from Grants Pass who complained about the dust coming off of the racetrack or something. Rod can probably talk more. It's just been a while ago since we've had to take his calls, but nonetheless, hotlines are of very little value to the racing industry or to the general public or to the agency, in my opinion. They were very little value to us as field burning smoke managers. And we had, you know, instrumented aircraft that did soundings, and we had field reps who had all kinds of radio systems set up and the same thing in similar thing in Union County, but where the bluegrass growers were. But nonetheless, I really question whether there's much value other than giving staff something to do to take telephone calls from the same 4 people day after day after day.
May I comment on that?
Absolutely.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So I foresee a situation where, let's say, for example, we put a rule in place that there's a mandatory stand down of 14 days after a horse is injected. Let's say we're at the racetrack and somebody watches a trainer inject a horse, and they know that that horse is going to go out and race that day. Dr. Everman talked at our last meeting about the way that it's kind of really hard to police this kind of thing. And I see an anonymous hotline as a way for somebody who may be on Shed Row and sees really messed up things happening to bring that to our attention and do something about it. So that's my 2 cents on the hotline. I agree that could involve a lot of weeding through the BS, but I don't know of any other way that somebody that's on the track and sees something really screwed up happening would have a way to bring it to the attention of someone who could do something about it.
I suspect they could bring it to the steward, but might be uncomfortable doing so for any number of reasons. Is there a reason that if we recognize if we pilot, so first off, this will be a pilot. I think we wouldn't be committing doing this for all eternity if we did this, because so my not that anybody really cares, my bachelor's is in criminal justice, and one of the things I learned when I was getting it was that hotlines are typically not super productive in preventing criminal activity. Also, for that one case, if it's not overly burdensome, why not have it if it doesn't cost us a whole bunch in terms of time and sorting through, which is a valid concern. Would there be a legal reason why, if we did a hotline, we would have to investigate every report, or could we use our staff's discretion to determine what is valid and worth following up on, or what simply just, you know, I don't know, somebody's got a blue horse on the track and they're beating the hell out of it. You know, clearly just a prank call.
Commissioner Barry, I first of all, I saw that Malia raised her hand. She may have had to jump off for a second, though. She's got a very small child that she's taking care of, but I do want to recognize her if she is there. And then also, oh, there she is. And then also afterwards, I'd like to get Mike's opinion on that being the steward.
Okay, Malia, you want to go? Yeah.
Commissioner Fowler basically covered what I was going to say, because we do have a very small group of trainers that all know each other. The idea when it was brought up in our staff meeting was for the trainers, if they saw something, for example, at the end of this race meet, we had a trainer leave some horses behind. And the idea was then that another trainer could have called that in earlier to someone to get that investigated quicker. Because these people all know each other and we all know their faces, the idea was this gave them an anonymous way to contact without feeling like they were under fire.
Leah, do you have any thoughts on weeding through potentially frivolous calls to the hotline?
I definitely think that there could be a lot of he said, she said, that could become a problem. That our investigators would have to go through. And like you said, I don't know the legal side if that would turn into them having to investigate every little thing.
So I guess I would like more information on what implementing a hotline would actually entail. What would be the best way to get that information for this committee?
I can tell you what we can do, and Micah may have some ideas also, being our IT guru. I think the best way for us to do that is electronically. Micah, do you want to add to that?
I'm not prepared to actually speak towards that, but I will do some research and come back to this committee with some thoughts and suggestions.
That would be wonderful. That'd be great.
I'm thinking the easiest way is to have a link on our webpage, and then we put some posters up letting people know it's there, where they can fill out a form and submit it, and that way it's not attached to their email address. I don't know what we'd have to do to get that done, but I'm sure we could.
Yeah.
Would we need it to be, oh, sorry, Mike, but would it need to be, this is a small committee. We can be relatively informal as long as we maintain order, at which point we're all gonna have to get out our big books of parliamentary procedure. So be warned, everyone. What? Well, we need more information. Oh, I know what would it, is there anything that would prevent us from simply having an anonymous questions, concerns? We don't have to call it a tattle on your neighbor hotline. It's just if you have an anonymous piece of information you'd like to provide the commission that they could follow up on if necessary, submit here, click. Because I want to save staff time and not have us chasing, you know, phantoms. And I also, Micah, go ahead. Please stop me.
I believe some of the earlier discussions were also around concerns. A lot of the people who are on the track may not have access to a computer, may not have access to technology. And so having a phone number would be beneficial. There are ways to do VoIP components where it just goes to a mailbox.
Like Google?
Yes, where we could anonymize it. Several staff members, we get a copy of that recording. We could then make a determination. We could have a policy or a procedure around these things. Again, this is the infancy stage of this discussion, and depending on how this committee wants to move forward, we can put together some thoughts around best practices.
Okay.
Leah has her hand raised.
Leah, go ahead, please.
I was just wondering, is it something that we could just put a flyer up? Somebody could make a flyer with a phone number at each one of the racetracks, and maybe in the case of Rod at Grants Pass, it's get a hold of Rod, or call this number and leave a message or something, and then somebody can check on that and handle it right away if it's something, like leaving horses behind. But and just so that everybody would see it and could make their concerns known that way, instead of having to go through a whole hotline thing.
Thank you, Leah. I think that's really good. And I think really this kind of speaks to the agenda item of security also, but see something, say something is a good principle in general, and informing the public, everybody of, hey, this is stuff you should be concerned about and watching for. And if you see it, we'd like to know about it. That would be I think that'd be a really good thing, both for the safety of the animals and, we live in a world with ALF and ELF and PETA, which when I worked for the VA's police department, we got a lot of warnings about domestic terrorism, and ALF and ELF certainly blow things up periodically because they don't like seeing animals used for anything. Increasing awareness about safety at tracks is a good idea. Any public setting, I think that's a good idea.
Hey, Gwen, could I speak
Yeah,
for a
Rod.
moment? Yeah, could I have a second?
Absolutely, Rod.
So I'm not saying it's not a bad idea, but anybody that's lived around the racetrack and's lived on the backside of the racetrack, I'll guarantee you, we know everything that's going on. Horsemen are not afraid to speak up and say stuff about other horsemen or staff or equipment or the racetrack. I don't know who these anonymous people would be because I don't know any anonymous people behind the racetrack. Behind the scenes, we know what's going on. And we, as staff, investigate things all the time to try to make sure that they're true or not true. And I know the ORC does the same thing. So we have a method already that if something happens on the racetrack or on the backside, they can anonymously go to the to Chris, to Mike, to the stewards. They can go in and have a personal meeting with those people anonymously and say exactly what's going on behind the scenes at the racetrack. So I don't know, outside of somebody that's not at the racetrack, if they would, they wouldn't have that access to do that. But as far as the racetrack itself goes, I don't see that this is really an issue that needs a phone for somebody to call in, because any one of those people can go have a private conversation with ORC staff or us as the race staff and bring those things to our attention.
And at the fair meets, it'd be the same thing where the person could go to the steward and report anonymously, and it's not going to be like they're filling out a form and everybody knows about it. Okay.
Right.
Any other questions about that at this point? Okay, I'd like to know more. Maybe Micah,
I
if you
think
could.
you had a,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think maybe Randy put his hand up.
Randy, are you there?
Well, only to succinctly say it, I mean, I agree with what everything Rod said. And as you know, the horsemen are sort of my responsibility problem, whatever you want to say. But I mean, when you come to a hotline and it's anonymous, I think you get into a little something the same as you see on the message boards on the net, where when people are anonymous behind their keyboard, they suddenly turn into, 10 feet tall bullies that can whip the world. And so
I think what you're describing is called trolling, Randy.
whatever, that might be it. But I guess to be succinct, as much as the value you would see it as a tool, just be aware that there's danger in it as a weapon.
Yeah. I don't think if we do anything with this, we're not committing to anything other than some sort of a trial and pilot. Because if it becomes, if it's a boondoggle, why do it? I'm willing to try all sorts of things, but I'm not willing to commit to doing things for the rest of eternity. So unless there was, your concerns are very duly noted, guys. I see it as potentially useful, but also potentially just a waste of time and resources. So we'll find out more at a future meeting and continue that discussion unless anyone has more to share on the subject.
Well, I would add one thing, that it would be very easy for either the stewards to notify us or the veterinarians, if we found out about it originally, to special these horses to the test barn and notify the lab that we had a lead that this horse had an intra-articular injection of corticosteroid, which can be difficult to detect in blood or urine anyway. But if they knew what they were looking for, it might be something that could be identified. And so if we got a tip on that, it's very easy to special the horses right at the time of racing. So just something to think about.
It sounds to me like we're not sure that a hotline specifically is the thing, but everybody wants to make sure that people are able to report concerning issues safely, anonymously, without concern of reprisal. Is that what I'm hearing from the committee? I think so, yeah.
I
Okay,
think
yeah,
there.
that makes sense to me. Other thoughts, comments? I think we're doing pretty well on time. I think we blocked out 2 hours for this. No, Connie?
Last topic, medication. And although it's daunting, I did send thanks to the work that Chris supervised and was done by Mike Gentile, our investigator. You were all sent a Excel sheet that lists what we do for medication compared to HISA, California, and Washington, just to give you an idea of comparables. And there's many ways that we can look at it. We can look at implementing huge bricks, small bricks. I know another commissioner would like it to see us be HISA. We could copy HISA's rules. We could choose to do none of the above. I know Dr. Everman had some ideas that he thought would really help with masking, preventing people from masking anything that could cause injuries. So I call on Dr. Everman, and then I leave it to you, the commissioner.
Well, the only thing I was suggesting is that we change our rule, the Oregon Racing Commission rule, from levels specified in urine to blood, because the lab can always verify. We always get blood on every horse that wins a race, or that is special, or is injured, or dies. We get a blood sample, but urine sample is not always present. So our rule specifies the amount of the drug that's permissible in the urine. So this is a little bit of a misleading thing with the lab. This happened this year, actually, with a horse that had 2 violations. One was Banamine, and the other was lidocaine. And our rule only specifies lidocaine, which is a local anesthetic, in urine. And they found it in blood because we didn't get urine on that horse. And so they ended up not doing the lidocaine. The stewards settled. The guy had a violation anyway because of the Banamine, and he had a stacking violation, and they settled that. So it didn't end up being a big deal, but it could have been. So I've already talked to Connie about changing our rule to specify the amount that's permissible in blood rather than urine.
Dr. Everman, you had also mentioned the last time we talked about non-steroids and bute. Do you want to talk about that, or is that still not an interest of yours?
Well, the non-steroidals, there's a number of them, and they're coming out with new ones all the time now. So we only permit 3 that can be used, and only 1 is allowed. So 97% of our horses are running on phenylbutazone because it lasts 24 hours, whereas Banamine lasts about 4. And the Arquel, or meclonophenamic acid, is a topical product that's used on through the skin of a joint that might be a problem. It's much harder to specify the dosage that's given. And we have anti-stacking rules, which Mike enforces. So they're not allowed to use 2 different drugs at the same time. Our problem is that the bute, we allow 2 grams to be given 24 hours before race time, which means it's about maybe 16 hours before pre-race exam time. So it can have a pretty dramatic effect on the soundness of the horse at that 16-hour point in time. And so it may be affecting our pre-race exam findings somewhat. I don't think if a horse is really lame, it's going to cover it up, but it's probably going to have some effect. Otherwise, they wouldn't be using it. So we might think about going, as does California and HISA, out to 48 hours. But that would require a rule change. And Mike could talk to that a little bit. He's been doing this a lot longer than I have.
Question, comment? Oh, go ahead, Connie.
Ask
no.
unmute. You're muted now, Mike. Try to unmute. See if that helps.
You're still muted.
While Mike's working on that, oh, there I see he's come up. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, we still can't hear
Oh,
him.
we still don't have him. Speaking generally, what are the criteria that this committee wants to recommend for deciding what medications are appropriate for horses racing in Oregon and what medications are inappropriate for horses racing in Oregon?
I don't think we have a problem with that right now,
Good.
Commissioner Barry. I think that the only issue that I see is the time interval pre-race that we are allowing non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, specifically phenylbutazone, to be given, because Banamine would be worn off in much less time. But if we had a 7 or 8 year old horse that has arthritic ankles and would be lame without phenylbutazone, they're working it on phenylbutazone. If they are not allowed to give that within 48 hours of post time, then we're probably going to get a better picture of what the horse is really like when we do the pre-race exam the morning of race day, which is going to be somewhere with the current schedule. We're going to be around 8 hours before race time when we do this. But
So
it would require a rule change.
Mike, you want to try and say something?
The,
Maybe you could type something in the comments.
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
the-
yeah, Mike.
okay.
I hear him now.
I still don't hear him.
Well, he's not saying anything.
Mike, say something. Give us a test 1, 2, 3. His lips are moving, but nothing's coming out.
Mike is going to talk through my phone.
Oh, good.
Okay, where were we at?
What you're going to have to do, Mike, is you're going to have to mute your speaker when you talk. Or better yet, just turn off Zoom and just talk through the phone.
But he doesn't have to turn off.
Okay, how about now?
Perfect.
Okay, where were we at? I got a little distracted there.
You were talking about, I think there were several things. There were medication. What was the last thing we were asking him about?
Well, I think that, Mike, the question really is, should we change the phenylbutazone rule from 24 hours pre-race to 48 hours pre-race to improve the findings of the pre-race exam? Your opinion on that?
You know, I could go either way on that, but I think you might be a good pilot, like Connie likes to call them. Try it out and see how it works. But I guess we'd have to change the rule, so rather than be just a pilot program.
The rules could be changed again next year if it did. I mean, obviously, the rules would have to be the rules for at least one season, but the next season there could be a change back if that was deemed appropriate.
Absolutely.
I'd support that rule change. I think it makes sense what Dr. Everman's saying, that you're not really getting an accurate soundness check on a horse if they're still under the influence of the butte.
Any contrary opinions? I don't hear. Oh, Rod?
What's the standard in California and Washington?
48 hours, 48 hours.
So you'd be following the same standard as the other two states adjoining us.
Yes.
Then
That might be nice just for consistency.
yeah, I agree with that. I just didn't want to change it if the other two states were at 24 and then you got people coming and they get hung up because the rules changed one state to another. I'd like to stay as consistent as we can between at least our adjoining states.
I see Randy has something to say. Rod, do you want to yield to Randy?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right, Randy, go ahead.
No, I just have a question for Dr. Everman, and that, I mean, just for the sake of asking, is what, if anything, is the downside to the horse and the horseman by making the change from 24 to 48?
I don't think there's any negative to the horses or the horsemen. I think it gives us a more consistent picture of what the horse is actually like. And if the horse is not sound, it shouldn't be running. It's probably not going to win any money anyway.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I was just curious as to if there was a downside in your opinion.
No, I think our only side is up in this case.
Seems to me the downside for the owners is they wouldn't be able to sneak a partially lame horse past a vet check. That would be the only downside.
I'm not sure I mean, Doc's pretty good about that stuff anyway, and I mean, there's not a lot that gets by him that way. I'm not too concerned about that part, and I don't think on the by and large that horsemen want to run a lame horse. I mean, it's just not, I'm not saying it's never happened, but, and again, I have a lot of faith in Dr. Everman that he catches a lot of that stuff, and we're doing a good job. It's just, again, I think you guys have brought up the main point here is that everything we're doing, we're dealing more with public perception than we are with any other issue here. So
do we need to refer that then with that it sounds like that's one of our recommendations as a committee. Then do we need to vote on that, or can we just put that in our list of recommendations when we refer it to the commission?
You can just make that part of your list of recommendations, and the commission has to vote on it. And we'll draw up some model rules for some of these things that you've agreed on.
Okay.
And again, the rules will just be, they'll just be to be considered for the commission meeting in January. And then if those rules are considered, then those would require a advisory, not advisory committee meeting, but they would require a hearing to make sure that all interested parties had the opportunity to speak about any concerns they have.
If we do change to any of these rules we've mentioned, like the 14-day mandatory stand down on intra-articular corticosteroid injections, we would be in compliance with the HISA in California. So people would find what Rod or Randy were saying is that there wouldn't be a conflict when they came here versus one of these other states. They'd have the same rules applying here, because Emerald is now under HISA. So they would be under the same rules in Oregon that they were under in these other jurisdictions, and they'd make it easier for the horsemen. And I could certainly tell the attending veterinarians, because I have a list of all those, so I could personally tell them that if they were going to do an intra-articular injection, to warn the horsemen that they cannot submit this horse for entry for 14 days. So it would be a problem getting the word out.
It sounds like you're in favor of implementing the HISA standards without joining HISA. Is that what I understand, right?
Well, yes and no. I actually talked to Dr. Stover, who's on the safety committee for HISA, and she referred my call to another person who has not called me back about whether or not a half-mile track could actually be approved by HISA. And if any other tracks that are HISA approved are half-mile tracks, this is my question. Before we go for approval with HISA and spend all this money, I think we need to find out if they will approve a half-mile track for thoroughbred racing.
Do we need to join HISA to implement their standards? is I guess what I'm asking.
No,
So
we
we
do
could, so we could implement their standards if we like their standards and want to stay consistent with the other jurisdictions without fees and approvals and all that other stuff that would go with actually joining HISA.
We don't need to join HISA, but every change in medication, it's all in our rules. So we would have change it in our rules individually for each drug. And I think we're working in that direction. We don't need to do it immediately. And certainly it's not going to be a problem to notify trainers, owners, and veterinarians of the changes we've made.
Yeah, and
Connie?
we've borrowed language from a lot of jurisdictions over the years doing rule changes, so I don't think HISA would be any different. You know, in an effort to get uniformity across jurisdictions.
So that's maybe a discussion that we refer to the commission for a fuller consideration after I've made my report at the next meeting, maybe? Does that sound?
Actually,
Lonnie?
Commissioner Beckstead had already asked to have a discussion about HISA at our next meeting. So it's already going to be on
Perfect.
the agenda.
It's there.
And I hope that everyone will remind all the commissioners of the cost to join HISA and the fact that it's only for a few days for the commercial track. I just don't know how we could possibly do HISA at our fair meets at this point.
It sounds like this committee is in favor of modeling our rules after HISA, but we don't feel like we have the resources to actually join HISA. Is that the message I can bring at my report?
Okay.
Randy, go ahead, man.
You're kind of crossing into territory now.
Oh,
So, okay, one thing to start with, and understand when I tell you that the national HPPA is still in the middle of this thing all the way, and in fact still have the lawsuit, which at the present time is going our way in the Fifth Circuit. But having said all that, I mean, let's just be cautious here about adapting a lot of some of this ISIS stuff in the sense of a lot of the things that they have initially adapted, they've had to step back and step away from because they found out the way they were doing things wasn't going to work. They were way into overkill on how they were going through their processes. And so I guess I would just caution you to be a little bit, be real tentative about how you go forward with this stuff. The money part is out of the question. I mean, for what they would cost, what it would cost to be part of it would put us out of business. It's just that simple. And so, but yeah, I understand that people are, you know, some people want to go that direction, but I got to tell you, they really don't, they're not sure themselves as to what direction they're going yet. And so let's not be in a hurry to follow something that we might have to change again real soon.
Yeah. We are not California. We are not Washington. We will set our own standards. It sounds to me like it would be a good idea for anyone who has concerns about specific provisions in the HISA regulations to review those and have something prepared to say at the commission meeting. Because I'm not opposed to leaving stuff out of there, but I think if we're going to leave stuff out, we need to have on the record that we had a robust discussion about why we did that, if the direction we're going is HISA.
I do think that there's some low-hanging fruit, which we've already mentioned. Another low-hanging fruit Mike can address. It has to do with shoes. Mike?
Yeah. I'm still waiting to hear back from ARCI. I want to kind of know where they're going next, as well as the HUHA, where they stand, because these rules that I'm looking at are kind of all over the board. You know, ARCI doesn't match HISA. We don't match them. About everybody except us doesn't even mention court horses. So what do you do with them? You know, as far as front toe grabs and all that. Now, HISA's backed off a little bit on their shoe rule to go with rimmed shoes. 2 millimeters or less from the ground surface to the horseshoe, up or of the horseshoe. Traction devices are prohibited on front and hind during racing and training on dirt or synthetic surfaces. And it goes on. Then you go to ARCI, and they have similar language, but they're talking about 2 millimeters of a toe grab still. Now, granted, I think everybody, including Washington, even though their rules haven't changed, still follow HISA when they're part of HISA. We are not. We're at 4 millimeters front toe grabs, and which is quite large compared to about everything else I see. So I'm still waiting to hear from a few more entities before I can really speak to it too much.
With your approval, Commissioner Barry, perhaps our quarter horse experts have some information on the quarter horse standards for that.
I'd sure like to hear from them.
What are you, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, what are you asking for?
I'm not entirely sure.
There's a lot of things.
There's a
flying
lot
around.
of things in the air. I
The
think
shoes, shoe requirements for horses that are racing. For grips or,
that bounces all over the place. You know, I race mostly in California, and they've taken the braking bar off of starting gates. I used to grind down toe grabs to they were almost nothing particularly on the front feet. There've been a lot of research done on vibration of front feet as they hit the surface of the ground, and the horse kind of slides as a part of their cushioning activity. But anyway, you've covered a lot of territory. The couple of things I wanted to comment on. Oregon years ago was a hay, oats, and water state. Then testing progressed from millionths to billionths to trillionths to ELISA tests and so on. And so you could find out whether a horse smoked a marijuana joint 6 months ago by an ELISA test. And so the commission then changed. We went to the legislature. The commission proposed to be authorization to be able to set quantities, to have quantitative analysis on the amount and the date and the before and after. ARCI that Mike mentioned had a very comprehensive study group that worked for years to develop medication standards. And I think we just started working through those 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. And I think we really need to step back and say, let's really understand what that is before we jump too far into it. As Randy said, there's going to be a lot of changes. California, the biggest change has been the horsemen just left California. You never saw anything less than a full gate at Del Mar. Now, if they can get a 4 or 5 horse gate, then you're lucky. So the same thing at Santa Anita, same thing at Los Alamitos. Anyway, all of those things, they have an impact. And as you suggested, Mr. Barry, that we can change something this year and change it back next year. You don't get the horsemen back. That's the problem with the change this year and hope to get them back 2 years from now. It doesn't happen.
Where do you see them as going? Are they going to other states, or are they going away entirely from racing? What are you seeing?
Well, depends on different thoroughbred people. I don't know, Randy'd have to comment on that. Our association membership has changed dramatically over the course of the last 10 years. We're predominantly Mexican now. Mexicans have a very long horse racing, match racing background. They'll be out match racing. They could care less in reality. They love the regulation of the regulated racetracks, but they would go to match racing And there would be no regulation on that just at the drop of a hat. If Grants Pass closed, they'd be over at Medford drag racing with whatever
What
it may be.
incentivizes them? Folks who would be prone, and I don't want to get into ethnicity, but folks who would be prone to match racing, who is what's keeping them out of, like, why are they at the track now if they would otherwise be match racing? What's keeping them at the track?
Both places. They like the order of and the predictability of a regulated racetrack. That's what they want, but they don't want to be driven out of the state with too many regulations that are just regulations for perception.
For the sake of regulation.
Sake of regulation.
Certainly.
That's all that they're interested in. They come by here all the time and we talk about it, and they say a lot of things, but I'm not gonna rat on too many of them.
For the purposes of the conversation will be had by the full commission, I would like our committee to be able to recommend, are we going to look at HISA as a jumping off point? Are we going to look at California as a jumping off point? Who do we want to look at as kind of a jumping off point for comparison to what we're currently doing and what we might want to do? And I see Rod and Connie. Rod, you want to go ahead first?
Just real quick, I just wanted to go back to HISA and quarter horses, because HISA does not regulate quarter horse racing. So they are completely separate. So like in mixed meets, there's two sets of standards going on in race meets, because like if we were HISA, we would still regulate the quarter horse racing and do all the testing and so on and so forth. And then HISA would take over for the thoroughbred side of things. So as far as the shoes go, I think that whatever we have in our standards, again, I would refer back to our neighboring states and what the quarter horses are doing in neighboring states for regulations, and the thoroughbreds are doing in neighboring states for regulations, and try to stay with those standards as best as
rather than trying to have unified standards for both breeds.
Yes, and not try to go and do our own thing. And like I said, there's differences between both breeds, and we need to follow those same standards, in my opinion.
Mike?
Yeah, no, the neighboring states, of course, with the thoroughbreds, they are following HISA standards. Now with the quarter horses, that's a different ballgame, because everybody's got different rules. Like I said, we're still at 4 millimeters, and the horses that are coming down from Washington, they're pretty much running on queen plates. I mean, they just got barely a nub for a toe grab. So yeah, I would like to. It might take a hybrid rule or two different sets of rules,
right,
to cover these. And so that's kind of what I've been wrestling with the last couple of days, trying to figure out what a intelligent way would be to move forward.
And Emerald Downs only has 2 quarter horse races a year, so you can't go by what Emerald Downs is doing.
No, and we have almost a majority of quarter horses now. Not quite, but it's pretty evenly split. I would say my caveat to, if we were going towards, let's say, HISA, is that we go step by step in this committee and determine which ones make sense for both breeds. Because I don't see that it makes sense to have different standards for quarter horses and thoroughbreds. And there may be some things in there in the HISA standards that may not make sense for quarter horses. That's just my thought.
Randy, I see your hand up over there.
I'm curious. And thank you, Chair Barry. I'm sorry. Curious about how close are we in what we're currently doing to the ARCI rules?
ARCI with as far as the shoes,
As far as anything across the board in general, are we fairly in compliance with what?
we're fairly
ARCI
close, not with the racing plates so much, but yeah, in the vast majority of the rules, we're pretty close. They might have a little thicker rule book than we do, but the rules that we do have do mirror fairly closely to ARCI in most things.
And Brandy, the spreadsheet that came along with this meeting packet outlines the difference from medications from ARCI and us.
Right, as soon as I can figure out how to open a zip drive, I can't ever get them open, but
I'll send it to you separately, Brandy.
that's fine. But anyway, no, I mean, that was my question because, you know, prior to this whole mess that's ISA, you know, that ARCI was what we'd operated under for a number of years, and they were moving gradually into a stricter and stricter environment too. So I mean, I can't look at it and say that they're really behind the times on this thing. And again, just you know, let's not fix it if it's not broke.
Can I ask, this is kind of a neophyte question, so I hope I don't embarrass myself in front of all these experienced horse people. It sounds to me like we're discussing a range between, I don't know, no medication, you got to run your horse barefoot, and no rules at all, and drug them up, keep them going, put whatever kind of shoes on. Where as a state, I don't think we want to be at either of those extremes. Where as a state do we want to be? And I'd open that to anybody who had thoughts on it, because it seems and maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems like the general conversation we're trying to have.
Well, I don't think either extreme is relevant at the moment. I mean, this Oregon's a well-regulated state. I mean, I don't think we should allow ourselves to get into the idea that we're not. I mean, you know, Doc Everman, Mike, everybody that you guys have on staff, they're good at what they do. And the medication rules that we've had in place, which have been ARCI rules, and I can't speak for the quarter horse folks, but you know, I mean, again, I just sort of inventing this stuff as they go. And so I'm just saying, I don't know if it's the extremes that you're talking about, Chair Barry. It's more of, you know, let's not, to what Connie said, let's be very, very cautious about how we move forward here, because we're not at a bad place right now. We are being regulated, and it is being well administered. So in some ways, I don't have a problem with sharing stuff with Washington, but you know, not everything they've done has proven to be a plus. I mean, the strike rule has not been a success whatsoever, and I mean, really deserves to be completely reworked. And some of the medication stuff's in the same boat. So again, there's a lot out here that needs to be talked about, and you need to be cautious because you're really getting into the bare bones of racing when you start talking about making some of these changes. Now, again, I have a great deal of trust in Doc Everman and Mike Twiggs to do what's best, but let's be cautious.
Yeah, I think those are valid concerns. I think when Connie goes and meets with important people, they've got questions about safety and medication, and it's important that she be able to demonstrate to them that we're taking action. So I think that's part of the balancing act there, is that Connie needs to be able to demonstrate that, you know, even if statistically it's not a real useful number, when we've got numbers of horse deaths that are well above the number that we're supposed to be shooting for, people are starting to ask questions, and Connie's got to be able to give them answers.
Somebody just joined from an iPhone. May I ask who that is for the record?
What? What did she say?
I guess we won't know.
Person who just joined the meeting, who do we have on the line for the meeting? Okay, member of the public. Public meeting.
Mr. Chairman, as a member of the quarter horse public, I'd like to say that, yeah, we have been, just as supportive as Randy has said over the development of medication rules. And it's always been kind of a fox and hounds process that we, in fact, we brought to the commission a couple of years ago a proposed rule to ban the use of clenbuterol in horses for racing purposes. And the commission, after a year's study, eventually adopted that rule because it does have strong anabolic properties with clenbuterol. And so, but as Randy said, I think there's Randy or Rod and we ran some experiments in hair testing in Grants Pass, and it was rather revealing, and the commission finally adopted rules banning the use of those. But there are always people out there who are trying to skirt the corner, particularly not as much in Oregon. We don't have the $1 million races or the $3 million races that you're trying to run at as other states may have. But we are very much for a rational, reasonable drug policy. Like I said, I race in California, and one of the problems that California is having is that it's very expensive to get a horse eligible to enter a race. And the estimates have been around $500 to get the pre-race examinations, all of the certifications that go along with that to enter the darn race. And so a lot of people have left California. They can't afford the $500 here in Oregon. So if you go the full bore California routine, then I think Rod and the fairs run out of horses quite quickly. So we just want to understand what's already there, understand what is happening in other states, and then move cautiously forward.
I think those are wise words. Thank you. Connie?
The only thing we have left is medication, and I'm afraid that's probably going to be too much for one call. Based on the conversation, I would propose that we keep meeting at least monthly through this. We'll bring model rules for the next commission meeting on the ones we've decided on. And, there'll be more discussion at the ORC meeting in January, which will be in person. And other than that, I would just recommend we open it to public comment and decide when we want to meet next.
All right. Public comment? All right, next.
I'm pretty open.
So that'd be what, January for our next meeting then? And Commissioner Fowler, is it Mondays are bad for you?
Sorry, I got to get to my unmute from my calendar. Gosh, it really depends on the week.
What about, what's the date of the January commission meeting?
The 18th.
18th. Do we want to meet? Would the 19th work for folks? Do we want to meet before the next commission meeting? I mean, I feel like we covered what we can cover before we report to them, maybe.
An idea, since it's in person, is you could meet after the commission meeting.
Oh, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Anybody? Yeah, let's plug it in for after the commission meeting then. Anybody have objections I think everybody's planning on being there, so. Yeah?
Yeah, that
Okay.
works.
Well, then if there's no objections, let's do that.
Sounds good.
Works for me.
Great. That was easy. Love when things are easy. Doesn't happen all the time. In that case, unless anyone has anything else, I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Meeting so adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. See you
Thank
guys
you.
in
Thanks,
January.
Connie.